Final and best panel coming up. This is the first ever that we've had an all-woman C-suite panel. I'm very proud that we're able to put this together. I saw Jennifer back in August at another charity event, and we came up with this great plan, and we were able to get these great 4 participants to be involved. I've been on their calls, and what a dynamic group. I could just think we need to have this call every month just to keep up the spirit and the camaraderie. Just a couple of housekeeping things. After this, we wrap up here in this room. Pence Mechanical, there'll be buses starting at 4:30. They'll take you down to the venue down there. It's business casual. It's a fun place to be. Good way to wrap up the event. And tomorrow, clay shoot starts. Practice at 8:30, and we kick off with the first shot at 10 o'clock. So that's out at the Nashville Gun Club. So hope to see everybody out there that's registered. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our moderator, Jennifer Fritzy. She's the Managing Director and Co-Head of the North American Telecom and Digital Infrastructure of Greenhill & Company. She's been there since 2021. Prior to joining Greenhill, she was previously Managing Director at Wells Fargo, where it says 25 years, but I don't believe that. I think she was only there for a couple of years. But anyway, we'll turn it over to Jennifer to introduce the panel.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and welcome everyone. And I'm really excited to have what I'll call a girl power panel here with these dynamic women to my left. I'm going to let them each introduce themselves and their affiliation, and then we'll get right into questions. So Blair, why don't you start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Blair Crawford. I'm the Executive Vice President of Vertical Bridge, and I handle leasing and marketing, and we are the largest privately held tower company in the U.S.
Good afternoon. I'm Brenna Berman. I'm the EVP of Strategic Partnerships for Dense Air Network. We're a lot smaller than you. We're an emerging company focused on Open RAN neutral networks, and I spend most of my time focusing on the multi-party partnerships required to deploy in urban settings.
Alda?
My name is Alda Leitzis, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Tilson Infrastructure. We're a developer and leaser of telecommunications infrastructure in 3 asset classes: poles to support small cells, macro towers, and we also provide commercialization services for fiber networks with public and private partnerships.
I'm Kelly Lazuka. I'm the CEO at Fullerton. We are a full turnkey company for both the wireless and the wireline customers.
Great. So maybe I'll just start with an open question for everyone and then get into specifics here. I mean, we're day 2 in this conference, and I would say just even in water cooler chats, I'm hearing kind of mixed views of where we are in the spending environment, and just in general, kind of how you all see it. I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, are you quite excited with 10 being the best of what's to come? Or are you seeing it better than last year, just given we have almost 3 months under the belt of under our belts this year? Kelly, why don't you start?
Okay. So I think it's going to be similar to last year, at least on the wireless side when it comes to the spending. At least that's what we're seeing now. We are starting to see carriers and other customers spend money in the wireless space, but certainly not at the degree we saw it a couple of years ago. But I've heard that this is probably the new norm for wireless, so I don't know that the expectation should be very high there. When it comes to fiber, though, we're seeing a lot more spend. We're seeing a lot more programs come across our desk for fiber. So I would say I'm at a 9 with excitement for there. But for wireless, I'd say I'm probably my kids would say mid, so 5.
Okay. Although you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I think last year was the year where we definitely felt and experienced the slowdown. And then I think just through some kind of creative working on our side, we have found some ways to feel more optimistic about this year, 2024. And so I do think there are pockets. And if you look at the wireless customers and their own complexities and needs and being under tight budget constraints, I think the key is trying to help them find ways to save money and still expand their networks. And that can be done through financing, using different product sets, different combinations of products. So I'm definitely more optimistic about 2024 than last year.
So I'm relatively new to the industry after spending about 20 years more in the IoT and urban infrastructure space. And I think, Aldo, what you said is right, that actually both of you, between the money coming out of the federal government for fiber and the focus on new business models that can help people make the most of the budget they do have, however small it is helping companies solve the problems that they've been dealing with.
Blair, I mean, I always think of towers ending with you as kind of the cardiovascular center. And so you have literally a front row seat. I'm curious as to your view. What are you seeing right now, really on the infrastructure side? Are people leaning in here?
Yeah, and I think first and foremost, I would say I'm a 10. I'm definitely bullish on it because I think if we look at previous years in the industry, we've definitely seen this lull. But I think, as you heard earlier, I definitely think we're in the best business ever, and companies are resilient. They find new and innovative ways to offer creative solutions. I think we've heard a lot of challenges today, and I think there's definitely challenges that are indicative of carrier investment cycles. So CapEx is cyclical. We see carriers, go out, they spend a lot of money on spectrum. They then overlay their networks on that spectrum, and then they do a pause. They stop, they slow down, they want to see that return on their investment. And I think honestly where we are right now is we're in that pause, right? Mm-hmm. Some carriers are just slowing down to look at the return on that investment. I think when you add that to the cost of capital, we've heard it over and over today, capital is expensive, interest rates are high, that can create a perfect storm. If you're in a company that doesn't have positive cash flow and your debt's really expensive, you're figuring out how long can you weather that storm. I think on the flip side is there's opportunities with challenges, and that comes with looking at ways and how do you partner with your customers to provide solutions when CapEx spend may change to OpEx or vice versa. What ways do you offer your solutions to your customers that may be different than what you did in 2023?
Right. Well, with that, I mean, one kind of, I don't know if it's a quick fix, but fix to that is shared infrastructure. And Brent, I want to bring you into the conversation here. What are you seeing? Are people embracing it, or are they thinking about it more? Because it's a cheaper sort of solution.
Yeah, cheaper if you don't count the red tape, right?
Right.
I do think people are considering shared infrastructure models more than they might have in the past. Mm-hmm. What can slow down that consideration or pause a project are some of the challenges to actually achieving shared infrastructure, the alignment of incentives across the partners, the regulatory environment that might not actually support a shared infrastructure model. What we're seeing in some places in emerging areas is that there are solutions to each of those problems, and that the lack of capital is driving this willingness to consider new business models, and in fact is one of the main drivers of our business model, which we actually offer our network as a service. It's entirely OpEx driven and committed to this idea that by leveraging available infrastructure out in the environment, we can drive down cost and time to market. So I think you are seeing a willingness to become part of a shared infrastructure project, and at the same time, the ability to actually do that through new business models.
Kelly, kind of on the same vein, I'm curious because you're dealing with both the wireless and wired side. Are you seeing any unique kind of, I'll call it think outside the box type of customer behavior? Understand you can't name specific customers.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's two areas where we're seeing that. So we're seeing it on their, simply on their OpEx side. Mm-hmm. So, our customers have, a lot of them have gone through a vendor consolidation, and so they've shrunk down the vendor pool of who they're kind of using at this point. But aside from that, they've also everybody's looking to cut costs. They're no different, mm-hmm. And so they are cutting their internal overhead to save costs and putting more of that burden on the vendors, that PM, that CM burden, and which is good for companies like mine. You know, it creates work, so that's good news. But what that's doing is in reducing their internal resources. Means that they can't manage a ton of vendors for various service lines. So we actually had a customer recently say to us, hey, we love the engineering. You guys do such a great job at engineering, but we're smaller now and we can't afford to manage multiple vendors. If you want to continue to do the design, you need to also, you know, bid on the construction and take that as well. Okay. And so we're seeing that shift of you know, less vendors in the running now, which makes it difficult, but good for the ones that are in it. You know, so that's good. But the other thing that we're seeing with our customers is that just the diversification of their assets. You know, what used to be just regular macro cell towers are now, you know, they're increasing their portfolio to include other infrastructure, small cell, fiber, DAS services, things like that, so that they can stay relevant, increase connectivity to their customers, and monetize, you know, their assets. Yeah.
And thank you. And that, you guys are making my job easy, because it perfectly leads into what I was going to ask. Tilson, you have your hands in, I'll call it, many honey pots. And how are you seeing kind of the trend that Kelly said, that they're beginning to meld together, diversification of the assets? How are you seeing that play out?
Yeah, I think that to me, the future of digital infrastructure relies in the full network. And so that's the combination of poles and towers and fiber. And I think that is starting to play out for more entities, especially around the government funding. Brenna, that you mentioned, you know, our original investment thesis was around poles. And poles is definitely our most mature asset class. And we have a very strong platform and a robust platform to own and operate those for the carriers. I think, but what's interesting is as we start to look at our tower business, which is very small and quite bespoke in terms of the kind of sites that we develop, we're seeing the customers looking to kind of bleed in between. What do they need, a pole or a tower, or maybe something in between? And so we really like having our hands in different honeypots, because we can see across the different products what is the best solution for a customer. You know, a customer might say, well, I need a tower here, but if you can't zone a tower here, or if they have a budget constraint, they may actually be very well suited to a 50-foot pole in the right-of-way, and that solves their RF issue. It actually is a cheaper footprint from a CapEx standpoint. And then the third asset class, the fiber projects, are very interesting because we also have the rights to develop vertical infrastructure along those rights-of-ways. And so those are exclusive, 25, 30-year contracts where, again, we see the opportunity to place vertical infrastructure where other folks maybe have never been able to in the past. And there are some new use cases, I think, where it would be very interesting for vertical infrastructure along roadways.
Although, are you noticing the tone of the conversations have changed year over year, where it's broadening out those conversations, where they're willing to or wanting to talk to you about different aspects of your business, or was that always the case?
Our business evolved over the years with asset classes. We didn't start with 3, but I do think that we definitely have conversations with different customers where we can talk about all 3 asset classes of what might be needed for them and what might be right for them in any given condition.
And Blair, how about, Vertical Bridge is the largest private tower company. I used to follow the 3 public ones. How does being private, we heard Alex speaking, differentiate the model? I mean, I think, are you able to do more, be more creative, different culture, et cetera?
Yeah, I think being private absolutely has its advantages. I think we can do creative and unique deals that others can't do. I think being private allows us, to grow at scale. We've been able to maximize our assets. We've grown pretty fast, and that gives us access to capital that allows us to continue to grow. If we look at things that we've been able to do, we've created the Vertical Bridge Charitable Network, which I think is best in class in our industry. I have to brag on it real quick because it's an employee-led initiative that is near and dear to our employees' hearts, and it's something I think being private allowed us to do. We've been able to give over $12 million to charity since inception in 2014, And we've also had over 7,000 volunteer hours put forth by our employees. And so that's something that, we look at. We're able to grow. We're well funded. We're here for the long term. We're not going anywhere, but then we can also do something that impacts our communities around us. And quick plug for Music Movement, the 8th annual Music Movement event is at ConnectX in Atlanta. So I would challenge everyone in here to do anything and everything you can to support Music Movement and come together as an industry to support Music Movement.
I don't know if Stacy's in the room, Bill's in the room. Yeah, it was. I can say I was there in California, and it was the highlight of my year so far. So it was a great event, and thank you to all the giving that you guys. You definitely walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So, all right. So Kelly, back to you. I'm curious what role are developers and the cities themselves playing in the infrastructure discussion? I mean, we live in Chicago. Chicago's not, excuse me. I'm sorry, Brenna. I'm sorry. Sorry. Brenna, I apologize. I live in Chicago, as does Kelly. I can imagine that's not an easy city to navigate. So, talk a little bit about the dynamics.
And I lived there for 25 years, so
that's
I know it well.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that Chicago is actually a good example of how cities and utilities and private developers are organizing themselves to bring about sort of shared infrastructure projects. You see this also in places like New Orleans. We worked on a project in the Raleigh-Durham area. And so some of the things that they're doing, right, is because it is so hard to, you think about Chicago, right? You've got the electric utility, you've got street infrastructure coming from the Department of Transportation, the Department of Water, right? Navigating all of that is pretty difficult. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you're seeing cities and utilities do is actually try to clear the way for that organization by creating inventories of all of the assets they have available that you could work into a network architecture. And that can be from available fiber all the way to like rooftops, poles, tax increment financing, and then providing someone over that, an actual staff person, to help navigate that inventory so that someone who's trying to come in there and actually establish a network project doesn't need to do that inventory themselves and try and navigate the different regulatory burdens that come from cities and utilities. You're seeing developers and universities as well kind of join in that game so that when I say cities, like all of Chicago, not just city government, for example, can put their best foot forward as a partner and say, look, we can't afford to fund the kind of project that we need to close the digital divide in our neighborhoods. What we can do is put our best foot forward with our ability to reduce the cost of that project and make it really, really easy to execute that project, whether that's from reducing or streamlining the number of permits that are required, changing the requirements around restoration work. So you're seeing a lot of creativity across cities and developers and other big tenants in cities like universities and even churches saying these are the assets we can put on the table and this is how easy we can make it to do business with us.
Are they moving faster than you would have expected, or I'm judging by your face, no.
Well, actually, what I would say is like sort of faster than whom, because to be honest, and I won't name any names here, right? In my last company, we built public-private partnerships to execute all kinds of interesting infrastructure projects. And the contracting process for that is never fun.
Yeah.
The city was never last in completing their portion of the contract work. Right? There are consulting firms and carriers and all sorts of other big organizations that are just as sort of red tape heavy as cities are.
And all the, public-private partnerships also is your ballywig. Would you agree with Brenna's statements?
I would, yeah. Our public-private partnerships, there's 3 of them we work on, and that's in our asset class. The Pennsylvania Turnpike, the North Carolina Department of Transportation, and then the Purdue Research Foundation. And in all cases, these are all willing entities who use some of their own investments or government subsidies to provide infrastructure that they needed, but they also wanted to be able to do more with that infrastructure so that they can use some of the revenue share that they receive to either pay for their operations and maintenance or to drive innovation. And so they're very much trusted partners with us, and we have a goal to help them achieve their goal. And so I think it's a really unique position to be in, to be caring about your own business, but also be caring for their business. When I look at, again, looking at putting the 3 asset classes together and the kind of applications that might come, people have been talking about 5G and such. These roadways are great examples of perhaps future autonomous vehicle roadways. There's been some projects in the United States that are creating dedicated trucking lanes or dedicated autonomous vehicle lanes. And so I think these are the exact kind of applications where we can bring together fiber along the roadway and then some kind of vertical infrastructure to support the radio signals along the way.
Kelly, densification, Blair touched on it. The carriers are spending a lot of money on spectrum. I think Verizon and C-band alone, not including the clearinghouse costs, paid more than $40 billion to get this spectrum. This spectrum used to be called high band. It's called mid band today. But if physics still works, there needs to be more densification. Are you seeing that at Fullerton? And does that also... Are the carriers really leaning into this densification? Are they thinking small cells? Kind of how do you see that?
Yeah. So I would say that, from the you said it right. In the past couple of years, the carriers have spent a lot of money on auction, on C-band, macro level deployment. But, in order to get the speed and connectivity that they need with that densification, we are definitely seeing a shift of that C-band deployment now to the more urban small cell level. And, the deal with Crown and, that they've signed for their small cell deployments with T-Mobile and Verizon, that's through 2025. Right. So there's still going to be a huge need for those densification efforts. And I would say that we're probably in, if we're talking baseball, I'd say we're probably in the 6th inning when it comes to the carriers at that level. But with fiber, I think we're pretty early on in the game right now. There's this increased demand for high-speed internet and the ongoing growth of the 5G networks and so forth. And that in itself creates growth for fiber. So as we start to see the telecom world, change and grow over the next couple of years, it is going to drive this demand for a more enhanced, fiber infrastructure. And, that's going to be great because it's going to produce more work for people, right? And so you mentioned the BEAD money, we're going to see those checks probably cut to the states at the end of the year, I would think, beginning of next year maybe. That in itself is going to, provide an uptick in deployment activities to close that digital divide. I'm not sure if the BEAD program is going to be enough to adequately support the broadband competition and rural coverage, but it's certainly going to make a huge dent in those densification efforts.
Got it. And Blair, how about for Vertical Bridge? I mean, you guys are all macro towers. You have cousins, I'll call it, in the Digital Bridge family that participate in the small cell space. Is there an area that you all think you'd want to diversify to capture the changing needs of the wireless customers, or we're staying in our swim lane?
I would say first and foremost, I think we're always responsive to what our customers want and need, and I think we will always take a look at what that is. But I think at the forefront, macro towers are always preferred and will most likely be preferred. I think when that's not possible, there's definitely a niche play, like billboards, rooftops, different type of assets. And so I definitely think we are always looking at our over 500,000 assets nationwide. How do we pair those assets with our customers for new and innovative solutions they need, and then also looking at, our cousins, as you called them, and partnering to provide what our customers may be asking for at that period of time.
Are you finding that, because the towers obviously after COVID and once the spectrum came out, that was an inexpensive way to just blanket the map. Are you seeing that still blanketing happening with C-band, and are the carrier at 345, I'll add in there, I mean, do they still have, to use Kelly's baseball analogy, a ways to go?
I'm not a baseball fan, so I think I know what the sixth inning is. I definitely think they have a ways to go. I would probably say maybe they're more strategic in where these assets are being located, and more strategic in the offerings that we're receiving. And I think we've definitely gotten more creative in the way in which providing those offerings and how we're building out the networks for them.
Right. Okay. Alda, one of the other focuses I have is on data centers, and power has definitely become what I keep calling the long pole in the tent for data centers. And as you see this kind of melding of the different silos of digital infrastructure, I'm curious as to your view, will the utility power sector become more a part of the conversation for this group in future conferences?
I think so, and I'm going to keep sticking with my theme of the future of digital infrastructure is all around the full network, which includes all parts of it. Data centers was actually my introduction to telecom in my career years ago, and you could probably do a heat map on the U.S. today and locate the hot pockets of power generation, green power generation, low-cost power generation, and just start to connect them with fiber. And that's, if those paths aren't filled in today, they will be. Case in point, I mentioned earlier that the Penn Turnpike is one of our PPP projects on the fiber asset class. And you may have recently heard the news that Amazon publicly announced a new development in northeastern Pennsylvania. It was interesting. It was picked up in World Nuclear Energy, a newsletter I didn't know about before. And so that data center isn't too far off of our Penn Turnpike fiber that we're trying to commercialize. And so that's just one relevant way that we're seeing that data center activity in our PPPs. And I know too from, Alex talked about it earlier today, most of these data centers today are AI data centers, and this one is no exception. Amazon chose this site based on the enormous amount of power that could be generated at this site. And I do think that AI and the technology that AI drives will help move forward the 5G applications we've all been waiting for. It'll all be in here, as somebody earlier today said on the tower panel.
You deal with the utilities too. Would you agree with Alda's thoughts?
Yeah, I think Alda's point that the future is the full network is absolutely right, that the lines that perhaps were drawn between different asset classes in the past don't hold anymore, and that to unlock the value of the work, it's across the entire network.
Kelly, you too also deal with I maybe ask you to pick your favorite child. You're dealing with cable companies, telcos, wireless, wireline, and utilities, correct? Which of those silos, without naming customers by name, but who do you think's leaning in the most and most forward-looking?
I know we say we don't have favorites, but we really do, moms, don't we? I'm just kidding. We kind of saw the forward thinking a while back with the cable companies, right? When they realized that in order to stay relevant and compete with the other MSOs, they needed to get away from those singular offerings and have a more bundled offering. And again, that was really, to stay alive, right? But now I think that the ISPs and the fiber providers are probably the most long-term forward-thinking with their plans, really because, for one, they have to be with the money coming from the government and private money. They have no choice but to provide a long-term plan in order to receive those funds. So I think that's kind of forcing them to think long-term. Also, it seems that the fiber providers have probably figured out the best way to monetize their networks, and I think they just have been doing it better for a longer period of time. When you look at the wireless carriers, though, they're probably the most reactionary. I would say, because they do change position a lot during the year, and it provides really more uncertainty around that strategic positioning than the fiber providers.
Great. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask kind of a out of the details question. I mean, as Steve indicated, it's very rare to have an all-female panel up here. And I'm just curious as to each of your thoughts, like how you see the industry. Do you see more diversification and more females entering it? And what, if not, what do you think's needed to encourage them to come to what I'll call the greatest industry in the world? Blair, you want to start?
Yes, I definitely see more women. I think when I look back to when I started my career, I think about when I was in high school and you flip through the yearbook and it said most likely to be in the tower company. That was not there. I didn't even know what this industry was when I was in high school. I didn't know what it was and when I was in college, and I fell into it in the early 2000s. I think now people are much more aware. We've seen all the different programs, that Nate's doing. We look at WWLF that they're doing. We're starting in colleges and high schools. Vertical Bridge does an internship to bring in high school and college students in sooner to not only learn the tower business, but learn what the wireless industry is all about. So I think just the sheer education that's happening is out there, and what it wasn't probably 10, 15 years ago. I also think that we get the questions all the time with how do we bring more women in and promote women. And I like to say that you have to own your own destiny. You have to own your own career. I think you have to be receptive to feedback and find mentors. I think that's a really big thing. And I think we've seen more and more support organizations coming through, like we said, WLF and other aspects within the industry that are more relevant and creating opportunities for women to have discussions like today.
And I would put a plug in for Vertical Bridge. I think you guys, if you look at your senior management, there's much more female representation than I've seen at some of your peers.
Well, and I think that's indicative of you have to love where you work. And I think if you love that, then you'll find happiness. Because a lot of people will look for success to define their happiness, but I think happiness will define your success, and that really comes from working with people that you truly love inside and outside of work.
Well said. Brenna, how about you?
I would add two thoughts to what Blair said, because I think she laid it out nicely. One is that education is how you create your pipeline. We actually need to push that younger, whether you're talking about this field or other STEM fields. All the data points to the fact that girls who have an interest in STEM will begin to lose that interest in the 6th grade. So you may have even lost them before they get to high school. So the younger we can push those programs, the better pipeline we'll have, the more qualified and excited women will be able to hire. And then the second point, which I almost forgot, it's the end of the day. The second point is mentors are critical, which Blair talked about. I have some mentors that I can look back on, and I know that I sit here because of them. The second thing that we need to make sure that women and really any talent that we're hoping to develop has in their corner is a sponsor, right? That person who's responsible for helping them step up and get to the next level, and moving beyond that role of mentor to that level of responsibility of saying, I think you should be in leadership in our organization, and I'm going to help you build that path to take advantage of that.
Great. Alda?
Wonderful points. I agree with all of them. I was trying to think of maybe a bit of a different angle. I know for myself, when I had children, I didn't want to be in this industry, in the tech industry. I wanted to take a break away from it and tried, flexing my other kind of things in my brain and worked for some nonprofits. My main point was to be home with the kids for a while and to work part-time. And it was a neat time for me. And luckily I had somebody who took me back into the industry when I was ready. When my youngest went off to kindergarten, I had a past boss who said, I'm at a different firm now, but come back and work for me. I can help you find your way. And my first job back wasn't the one that I wanted, but it provided me a great on-ramp, which now is a thing. There's these on-ramp programs for all these wonderful, very talented women who have chosen to take some time away, who are, again, very talented and ready to get back in, but they're definitely afraid. So I really encourage the on-ramp programs, or for all of you out there, if you know of anybody who you know has been a talented person, but took some time off for whatever reason, maybe is to care for elderly parents. I think that those on-ramp programs are really valuable, and it was probably 5 years ago that I reflected on this in my own life and called up that past boss and said, thank you so much. You know, I didn't realize how important that was for where I am today, and I wouldn't be here today without his encouragement and kind of his just trust that even though I didn't want the job that he gave me, that he was just getting me back in.
Yeah.
And so that was just maybe something everybody can think about. But you only need to help one person in one way, and maybe that's a different angle to think about.
Great. Kelly, last but certainly
They
not
took
least.
all the good stuff. No, I 100% agree with all three of these ladies. Excellent points. Not much more that I can add to that, except I really admire the programs that you mentioned, Blair, the organizations that are going into the schools and starting at that young age. But there are those women out there that, you know, are kind of stagnant in their career and really want to get to that leadership level. And, you know, how can we help support that? And I really do believe that if your company is committed to the, you know, creating that more diverse environment, I really encourage you just to take a look at even just your job descriptions, and make sure that, you know, women tend to not apply for higher roles if they don't have 100% of those skill sets that are listed, and really weighing your must-haves versus your like-to-haves, so that you can get more women to apply to these leadership roles, because I think you'd be really surprised not only at what they bring to the table, but how quickly they can learn.
Great. Well said. Any questions from the audience? We have about a minute left. I'm going to give it to. Okay.
I think they're ready for a cocktail.
I think so too. Well, thank you so much, ladies. That was great.